We are going to go now to the 2020 national recipient of the Seattle Hempfest Cannabis Activism Excellence Awards, Michael Krawitz, to bring you some truth and justice.
Michael Krawitz, Executive Director, Veterans for Medical Cannabis Access. We were successful after many years of working inside the VA. Veterans Health Administration set up a policy that we helped negotiate in 2010, updated in 2011, and then again in 2017, that clarifies that veterans are not to be punished in any way should they use cannabis under state medical marijuana programs when they go to the VA hospital. And that's been a really important protection. It's allowed for veterans to sort of come out and create a veterans-based cannabis organizations really for the first time. As I said before, veterans have been around forever in the cannabis movement, but it's really kind of a new development to have veterans service organizations that are dedicated to cannabis, and whether it's cultivation of cannabis for therapeutic means, it's therapeutic to grow cannabis. Whether it's access to cannabis organizations, there's a wide variety of organizations that are working on various issues, picking up some of the slack really from the major veteran service organizations out there that haven't done enough in this field, in my opinion, and also kind of working on cannabis issues, which for various reasons the federal government can't put its hands on. We have been really enjoying a lot of support at the national level around 2007, 2008, when it became clear to us that the VA policy was going to make it clear that the VA couldn't fill out any forms or help the veteran participate in the state programs, even though they were allowed to do so. The VA couldn't support them. They couldn't recommend cannabis or fill out the forms for them to do that, which put the veteran out into the community to pay for their own doctor visits and pay for their medicine, even though all that is cared for many vets inside the VA hospital. And we decided to go with the narrative of the Veterans Affairs doctor not having the free speech, because the Conant case in the Ninth Circuit showed that it was a free speech act to write that recommendation. So we created a narrative around the VA doctor's lack of free speech hindering the veteran from being able to get adequate medical care. And that has been wildly successful. We've got about 6 bills in Congress that all reflect that tone to try to correct that issue. And really proud to say we got veterans now that have come together. We're working on the next chapter in this. It's in this dialogue with the VA. They've created a kind of a Veterans Action Council, and you can reach out to us and these veterans if you're interested in supporting us and supporting their work. So internationally, it's been an amazing ride. Quick history lesson, that marijuana was made illegal in 1937 with the Marijuana Tax Act, found unconstitutional in 1969. They came up with this new law, the Controlled Substances Act in 1971, that relied very heavily on a treaty that we had signed into in 1961, the Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs. This treaty and the guy behind it, Harry Anslinger, our ambassador to the United Nations. Formerly, he was the head of the Federal Narcotics Bureau inside the U.S., a chief person behind the Marijuana Tax Act back in 1937. And you can read all about that in Jack Herer's great book, The Emperor Wears No Clothes. Shout out to Jack. Rest in peace, man. We love you, miss you from Hempfest. So Jack, by the way, Army veteran, Korea era. And I think that it's really important to understand that as we're legalizing marijuana, and we'll talk about this later, with the MORE Act and everything, but we were the driving force. The United States was the driving force in spreading the drug war around the world, being the enforcer of the drug war for many, many decades. And the impact is I think, most acute on indigenous communities, their traditional use of medicine. This wasn't completely, accepted. This wasn't a worldwide phenomenon of hating marijuana. There was a lot of folks that really fought hard to not fall under this big umbrella. India put up a pretty good fight against marijuana prohibition way back in the day, in 1920s, 1950s. late 1950s, when these discussions were happening, in the 1920s and 30s when these treaties started to begin to have cannabis in them. And it's important, I think, to understand that despite legalizing marijuana in many states, we haven't legalized at the international level. And at the international level, the ripple effect, if you want to look at the prohibition as like a big explosion, the ripples are still going out. It hasn't started going back in yet. It hasn't stopped growing. And the folks around the world that have been using cannabis as a traditional medicine forever, they really feel the pinch. The bigger countries, the countries with a lot of geopolitical power, sure, they're able to legalize marijuana. It's a lot harder for a small country. And I want to put a shout out. We've had a lot of help at the international level from this year. We've been really working very closely this year and last year with Switzerland and Jamaica, and they've been really helpful at the United Nations. Before that, for a couple of years, it was Czech Republic and Uruguay. So we work with whoever's working with us, and who gets the merit badge opposed to us right now. It's Nigeria and Russia and Indonesia, if I were to take it off the top of my head.
Well, let's talk about what's going on nationally.
Thanks, Viv. So I've been coming to Hempfest now for several years. I guess I don't even know how many years now. I've been sort of making an annual thing to come out to Hempfest on several stages, on several occasions, give updates in various forums on what's going on internationally. Your kind of UN cannabis report. And this year, it's a really exciting year. And we have a possible change at the international level. The World Health Organization, for the first time in 50 years, has changed its position. Its previous position was cannabis had no medical value, and that drove a lot of very draconian cannabis policy at the international level. They've changed that position. They now support cannabis as a medicine. They've given a whole package of recommendations over to the UN to vote on in December, and that might change international law. So what does that mean inside the United States? Well, as the Controlled Substances Act is written right now, it actually is written right in our Controlled Substances Act in the United States that should there be a change in the international treaty, the Attorney General will determine if that requires a change in our scheduling inside the US, regardless of any other decisions about whether it has accepted medical value and all those things we've been fighting about in court for 50 years in the cannabis movement inside the US. And I think it's really important for people to think about one thought, right? We've got a bill before Congress, the MORE Act. The MORE Act is written by one of the main sponsors is our vice presidential candidate, Kamala Harris. Senator Harris is a backer of this MORE Act that would legalize and deschedule marijuana. It doesn't mention the treaty at all. And that's not a problem legally. I've been told by the legal scholars that that's okay. We can pass a law in Congress that disregards the treaty, and the treaty can't invalidate our law. The newest thing wins. So if there's a new treaty, that wins. If there's a new federal law, that wins. Whatever's newest, that's what the law of the land is. So that can work. But this is the question I want to ask everybody. Do we really want to pass a law at the national level that doesn't give any guidance to the White House on what we want to do in Vienna? And again, what I said before, we have a horrible track record. We owe a debt to society worldwide to fix some of the damage we've done with this drug war. We talked a lot about it inside the United States. We'll amplify that and then put that out there in the world. That's the damage we've done out there. So think about it. Do we want to tell the White House? And just one last little legalistic thing. The professors also tell me that the United States Senate, while it doesn't do treaties, the executive branch, the president does the treaties, the Senate approves the treaties when they're passed, and then over time does give consent and does give advice to the White House when needed. So it wouldn't be inappropriate for the Senate to put something into this bill that would give guidance to the White House. But do we want to? Do we want to give guidance to the White House on this? Do we want to just leave them on their own, the State Department to come up with a plan? How do we want to handle it? See what I mean? It's a top level thought process that I'm trying to get going in the movement. Where's your head on that, Viv?
America is the country that force-fed prohibition through treaties and other means all across the country all across the world to other nations. We spread prohibition around like the pandemic is spreading around the globe. And I believe that it's up to America, and Americans have the responsibility to lead the way with undoing this mess. We now have, several states where there's people selling nugs, you know, out of a retail store. People drive up, they buy an ounce of pot, they drive off. They don't even need to look through the rearview mirror because the cops don't care. Yet, still in some countries that we force-fed prohibition down their political gullets, you've got people going to jails and prisons or worse over cannabis. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. You know, I'm sitting here thinking, what can I do to help people understand this thing? You know, give people a window into this process. And it's interesting that the delegates there at the United Nations in Vienna, that when they work on drug policy every single year, they meet in this big, huge room way off of the street. You have to have a badge just to get through the front gate, way apart from any peering eyes of the public, and the media really doesn't take very much interest at all, and there's no windows in that room. If I were to give you a little window into the room, let me tell you what you see. You see 1980s. The rhetoric coming from a lot of these countries against marijuana sounds just like it came right out of our Just Say No playbook, maybe even some of it direct from Anslinger and the hateful reefer madness stuff. Really, they're reusing that same old rhetoric. Countries like Indonesia, Russia, Nigeria, like I said. And then there's our champions, you know, countries like Canada and Uruguay and others that actually have been kind of silent, not really driving the chariot. So I want people to understand what it looks like inside. We're doing so great out in the field. And I don't want people to think that, you know, it's all roses inside the United Nations. We have a uphill battle that we need to fight to get the world to change its drug policy. And like I said, you know what it reminded me of when I was just at these meetings the other day at the UN. We had cannabis meeting just the other day, unprecedented, a whole series of meetings because of this vote coming up in December. And it reminded me of going into a war zone way after the battle, way after everything's over in the war, but there's still ordnance left in the ground, right? You got to be careful where you walk, that you don't step on a mine. Well, that's what it's like. This is old rhetoric that the United States put out there in the 1930s. We're embarrassed of, and it's coming back from Nigeria. And I think that people need to see that. They need to understand what the USA is saying in these forums, you know, that we're still carrying the ball. We still haven't changed our tune on the drug war. So it's time. It's time. And I really thank you for putting a spotlight on the Dogga couple. Much love to everybody out there, man. And thanks for having me on this incredible virtual COVID safe, responsible event, man.
Thank you so much, Michael, for all the work that you're doing, and you are really speaking the message of Hempfest. This is what the Hempfest is really all about. You know, we have the music and the vendors and all this fun and everything, but really it's about the message, the activism, the advocacy, the justice, you know, and it's not all roses in America either, and I want to remind everybody that as well, that we have to finish the job, and frankly, you know, a lot of times we're hearing crickets, that all the reform funding is dried up. And there's some people even in the cannabis industry that I think don't want prohibition because it might compete with their economics, right? And we got to finish the job. We have to keep the fire burning. And that's what Hempfest is all about. And that's what you've been about. And we have the UN at Hempfest, but unfortunately for us, it's unbelievable nugs. You know, we need to get the real UN more involved. And that's the work that you have been doing. And I just honor you. And that's one of the reasons that you're the recipient of our National Activism Excellence Award this year, my bro. Thanks for being a part of this.
And the land is dark.